Whenever you're designing something as big and complex as a video game, bugs are bound to show up. And while developers invest in QA and testing to find the bugs, a few always end up slipping through. That's not always a bad thing. In this video, we'll be taking a look at a few games where the bugs really changed the way people approached entire genres of games. We'll start with the accidental invention of juggling. Not the kind of juggling we see at the circus, though. We're talking about video game juggling, where you launch an enemy into the air and keep them there with attacks until they die. Juggling has become an essential mechanic of games like Tekken and Devil May Cry, but you'll be surprised to know that it was created by accident. Before he developed Devil May Cry or Resident Evil 4, Hideki Kamiya was working on the first installment of the Onimusha series. It was his first take on the hack-and-slash genre, and it introduced many of the concepts that he would later use in DMC. The juggling, though, was an unintended glitch in the game's combat system, but he kept it around. When the game got into the player's hands, juggling became a big part of how players executed combos, and it was a challenge to see how long an enemy could be kept suspended in the air. And that's how juggling was born. These days, if a hack-and-slash action game doesn't have juggling, that's considered to be weird. That is, unless the game's title has the word Souls in it. But let's go back in time to Super Mario Bros. We don't talk much about the bugs in Super Mario Bros. That changed gaming, because Shigeru Miyamoto's masterpiece had a lot of intentional innovations in it. Sure enough, though, there's a bug in this classic that has become an integral part of platforming games. We speak, of course, of the wall jump. If you've played Super Mario Bros., you'll know that if you can jump into a wall at just the right angle, Mario will sort of make a quick hop along the line of the wall. As handy as this is for reaching high places, one of its most important uses is in saving yourself from falling into pits. It wasn't an easy thing to do. It's an unintended quirk of the design, but it was an important skill to master for speedrunners and leaderboard climbers. Basically, wall jumping was key to graduate from novice plumber to journeyman. These days, you'd be hard-pressed to find a platforming game that didn't have wall jumping in it. In fact, games have gone further since then. Prince of Persia was a modern platforming series that introduced wall running to most gamers. And then we have games like the Mirror's Edge series that combine all kinds of wall shenanigans into its parkour. We could honestly make a whole video about the influence Mario has had on video games, but that's for another day. Next, we're going a little crazy and looking at rocket jumping. Quake is another game that did so much on purpose for its genre, multiplayer first-person shooters, that this happy accident tends to get overlooked. Or rather, the history of it gets overlooked, because rocket jumping is something that gamers absolutely take for granted. This is a bug that technically existed in Marathon and Rise of the Triad before Quake, but didn't really become popular until the Quake community started doing it. So here's the thing. In these games, your objective is to kill your opponents. It might not make much sense to take your super powerful rocket launcher and point it at your own feet, especially in Quake, where you can totally take damage from your own attacks. However, if you jump and fire a rocket right under your feet with the correct timing, you can launch yourself high into the air. The reason why this became so important to Quake players is because movement and agility are important factors in those games. ID Software designed the weapons and maps of those games to give players opportunities to dodge attacks and get to locations that gave them the edge on their opponents. Rocket jumping was not supposed to be part of the equation, but it became a vital skill to master for high-level play. From the Unreal series to Valve's Team Fortress 2, all the way to the rocket launcher sported by Pharaoh in Overwatch, rocket jumping has become a mainstay of the genre. Even though ID has failed to make Quake relevant to gamers today, its mechanics and bugs live on. Now, we'll take a look at the famous Bethesda bugs. This is a little different in that Bethesda hasn't exactly encouraged developers to leave bugs in their games, but they've become famous themselves for the hilarity they accidentally pack into their experiences. At the heart of any game is the game engine, and for a long time, Bethesda had been holding onto their awkwardly named Gamebryo engine. This was the engine that powered Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Its successor, the Creation engine, wasn't changed all that much, and that was the engine that drove Skyrim and Fallout 4. The Gamebryo and Creation engines were clearly not capable of handling the massive scale of Bethesda's RPGs, and that led to a whole host of bugs. From dialogue glitches to characters clipping through walls and objects, all the way to things getting launched randomly into space, you really got the sense that these games were being held together with string. But for many fans, that was part of the appeal. Bug and glitch compilations of this series are all over YouTube, and there used to be streamers who would push the games to their limits to see what kind of silliness would happen. Skyrim and Fallout 4 both had people looking forward to seeing what kind of nonsense they'd encounter in those games. Alas, Bethesda has replaced the Creation engine with Creation Engine 2, and this one is looking a lot more polished than the Gamebryo-based games of the past. While that's technically a good thing for the overall stability of Starfield and other games that'll use the engine, we do feel like some of the fun has been lost. And now, part 1 of our 2-part finale, Street Fighter II combos. While Street Fighter was a popular game in arcades, the fighting game community reverses Street Fighter II for its role in codifying fight games as a genre. Like a few of the games we've seen before, there were many intentional aspects of this game that have come to shape fighting games as we know them. But Street Fighter II's 2 most important contributions to the genre were bugs. Combos, the idea of stringing together a series of hits, are a total no-brainer in fighting games today, but they were invented by accident. The way this bug was uncovered was when producer Noritaka Funamizu was playtesting the game's iconic car-smashing bonus stages. Those stages encourage you to beat up the car as quickly as you can, and in the process, Funamizu discovered that there was a way to combine the ends and beginnings of attacks into combos. This could, theoretically, lock an opponent into eating 2 or 3 attacks with no way to defend themselves. In the freer days of the 80s and 90s, where if something worked, it worked, Funamizu figured that no one would ever be able to nail the timing required for these combos, so the glitch went unfixed. It turned out, of course, that he was 100% wrong. Not only were players able to do combos, but mastering each character's combos became a key aspect of the Street Fighter experience, which was good for Capcom since that meant players would pump more quarters into the game, but no one could have anticipated the cutthroat competitive scene that formed around this game. The road to high-level Street Fighter play was paved with 2 bugs. There were combos. And then, Part 2, Street Fighter II's cancels. As players build up their combo game in Street Fighter II, they discovered something else. Each attack has an animation that takes milliseconds to complete, but when you're playing tournament-level Street Fighter, those milliseconds really count. If an opponent can dodge your attack, the time it takes to complete the animation leaves you wide open for a counterattack. This is where cancel comes into play. Players found that the right button press at the right time would cause the character to skip the rest of their animation, freeing them up to do something else. Cancels allow players to flow effortlessly from attack to defense and to attack again, and they've evolved into a crucial part of strategy. You can use a cancel to trick your opponent into defending one attack when you actually intended to do something else. All we'll say is watch some professional Street Fighters play to get a real idea of how combos and cancels have made this series what it is today. Fighting games are built on these foundations. In many ways, what differentiates one game from another is how they handle combos and cancels. To this day, Street Fighter V allows combos of about 5 hits to focus on positioning and defense. By contrast, Capcom's own Marvel vs. Capcom series encourages players to draw their opponents into lengthy combos that can delete half a health bar in a flurry of hits. Mortal Kombat, Tekken, and Guilty Gear exist as points along the spectrum between the two. The thing that they have in common is that they all have Street Fighter II to thank for inventing the basics. That's all for our look at bugs in gaming today. Thanks for watching.